Welcome, dear listener, to my channel, where we tell scary stories. If you enjoy these chilling tales, please subscribe for more horror. Now let's begin. The air hung heavy with humidity, carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass and distant rain. The sky, usually a brilliant blue canvas on which the neighborhood kids painted their games of cowboys and Indians, today wore a bruised purple, heavy with the threat of thunderstorms. Inside our house, the wind rattled the loose shutter on our back window. My younger brother Tom would have called it an exciting backdrop for a ghost story. Me, I was just glad that Saturday morning cartoon reruns could drown out the unsettling sounds of the storm. My mom poked her head in the living room. "Anyone want waffles?" she called out, her voice competing with the cartoon theme song and the wind. "Sure," my dad replied without looking up from his newspaper. "Don't forget the syrup," she hollered back. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." My mom was one of those people who got excited about everything, a trait that often left me rolling my eyes but warmed my dad's heart. Tom burst into the room, kicking off his sneakers with a thud. "Are we gonna play the mystery game after?" he asked, his eyes shining with excitement. "We sure are," Dad said with a smile. "Just finishing up here. You go ask your mother if she has the box ready." Tom bounced out of the room, probably to show off his new toy truck to Mom. Dad looked up from his paper, his brow furrowed. "What was that noise?" he muttered. "Probably just the wind, honey," I said, reaching for the syrup. He nodded, but I could tell he wasn't convinced. It must have been 15 minutes later when we were gathered around the table enjoying our sweet breakfast and discussing the mysteries we would soon be solving when I heard it. A distinct rap on the roof. It wasn't the erratic drumming of rain. This was sharp and distinct. I paused midway to syrup-slathered mouth, watching Dad freeze with a fork poised in midair. Mom looked puzzled, while Tom, bless his innocent heart, continued digging into his plate with gusto. "Did you hear that?" I asked Dad, nodding toward the roof. Dad exchanged a worried glance with Mom. "Come on," she said, rising from her seat. "Let's check it out." Dad silently agreed. Tom, ever eager to be included, demanded to go with them. And for good measure, I followed along as well. The three of us cautiously approached the back door. We lived in a quiet neighborhood, and the idea of someone walking on our roof was unnerving. But as we unlocked the door and stepped onto the patio, Tom's face fell. "It's just a leaf," he said in disappointment, pointing to a lone maple leaf skittering across the shingles. Dad let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "Of course it is," he said, forcing a chuckle. Who would have thought a little old leaf could startle us so? We were halfway back inside when it happened again, that distinct rap on the roof. This time accompanied by a scraping sound as if something large was being dragged across the shingles. A shiver crawled up my spine. This time when I glanced at my parents, I saw the same dawning realization reflected in their eyes. Whatever was up there wasn't a leaf. We stood frozen for a moment, listening intently. Then Dad made a decision. With Mom and I close behind him, he walked toward the garage, pulled the heavy workbench outside and rolled it into position beside the back door. Then he grabbed a baseball bat from the hooks on the wall. "Stay here," he said quietly. More to me than to Mom, since Tom was too young to grasp the gravity of the situation. He nodded curtly, his jaw set with grim determination. Taking a deep breath, he slowly opened the back door and stepped out, gripping the bat tightly. I could feel Mom's hand tightening on my shoulder as she peered into the backyard. In the dim light filtering through the storm clouds, I could barely make out Dad's silhouette framed in the doorway. He took a tentative step forward, then another, his eyes scanning the yard. Moments stretched into an eternity, broken only by the ominous creaking of our old house. Then I heard Dad's voice, low and tight. "Hello? Is anybody there?" His words were swallowed by the wind, but I knew he was trying to sound brave, for Tom's sake, for Mom's sake, and maybe even his own. A twig snapped somewhere in the backyard. We all jumped. And then, as if in answer to Dad's call, a figure emerged from behind the oak tree at the edge of our property. Relief flooded me, momentarily eclipsing my earlier fear. It was just Mr. Henderson from next door, his hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. "Henderson," Dad called out, his voice echoing in the sudden quiet. "What in the world are you doing? You scared the hell out of me." Mr. Henderson looked genuinely startled. I'm sorry, Ed. I didn't mean to intrude. I saw the light on and thought I'd pop over to see if you needed help with anything. Your wife mentioned you were expecting a storm, and well, I just wanted to make sure you were all right." Dad eyed him skeptically, but I could tell he was struggling to maintain his bravado. "Thanks for your concern, Henderson, but we're fine. Just a little rattled. Tell us you didn't see anything odd on your way over here. Anything at all," he added hastily. Henderson frowned, thinking hard. "Let's see. I was reading in the den and I must have dozed off. Next thing I know, the lights go out and I hear this commotion on your roof. So I come out back to investigate and naturally I see nothing. But when I was coming over here, I did see that stupid cat of yours slinking around on the fence. Other than that, nothing. What exactly is going on here, Ed?" Dad shot me a panicked glance, then recovered smoothly. Just some overactive imagination brought on by the storm, Henderson. We appreciate you looking out for us, but honestly, you should head back home. I'm sure your wife would want you there with the power flickering on and off and all," he added diplomatically, hoping to end the conversation. "Well, all right, if you're sure," Henderson hesitated. "But if anything changes, you holler." "All right, I'm off. See you later," he said, heading back to his own yard. As soon as he disappeared behind his oak tree, Dad let out a shaky breath. "That was close," he murmured. "Yeah," I said softly, still shaken. I think Mom was too stunned to say anything. I could tell by the wild look in her eye. She was definitely not thinking this was a simple case of an overly active imagination. Dad led us back inside, casting nervous glances over his shoulder. "Everything's fine," he said, trying to sound convincing. "It was just the storm and a nosy neighbor. Nothing to worry about." But I could see it wasn't nothing. We spent the rest of the day playing board games and watching movies, keeping the lights on and the curtains drawn, pretending that the wind and rain were just part of the background noise. But all three of us knew we were trapped in a cage of our own making, hiding from whatever was out there in the shadows of our backyard. It wasn't until late that night, after the storm had passed and the moon shone brightly through the clean window, that we finally dared to peek outside. The wind had died down and the clouds had cleared. In the distance, a rainbow arced across the sky. But we didn't need that morbid reminder of the rain and thunder. The baseball bat leaned against the door jamb was enough. Whatever had stalked our roof was gone, and in the days that followed, life returned to normal. But now, whenever I hear the wind rattling our loose shutter on the back window, I remember the storm and the cage we hid in. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I swear I can hear the scraping of claws on shingles. It's graduation week, and we're kicking off the celebration early with a special live read of a horror short story on June at 7 p.m. Pacific Time. This story was published online and has been viewed more than 1 million times. It also inspired a film adaptation, which premiered last year. So join us and find out how our writers and directors bring a story to life. And since we're celebrating graduation, 2 lucky viewers will win a custom diploma signed by everyone here. To enter, leave a comment with your favorite line from the story and include a social media handle so we can contact you if you win. You don't need to be watching the live stream to win. Just make sure your YouTube account is set to public. The contest closes on June. For official rules, check the description box. Now let's get started. Last day of senior year should have been one of the happiest nights of my life. We'd walked across the stage, posed for photos with our families, and cheered until our throats were sore. Everyone was buzzing about graduation parties, about freedom, about the future waiting outside the town limits. But I didn't go to any parties that night. Instead, I drove back to the school. Something pulled me there. something I still can't explain, like unfinished business I didn't know I had. The campus was dark except for a few parking lot lights buzzing with moths. My tires crunched over loose gravel as I parked near the gymnasium, the same place where we'd lined up for the ceremony just hours earlier. I told myself I only wanted one last look, one private goodbye to the place I'd spent most of my life. But when I stepped out of the car, I knew it wasn't just nostalgia tugging at me. The air was too still, too heavy, carrying a faint smell of damp concrete and burnt dust, as if something inside the school had been smoldering all day unseen. I walked up to the doors, expecting them to be locked, but when I tugged, they opened with a hollow groan. The dark swallowed me immediately. I clicked on the flashlight on my phone, its weak beam barely cutting through the blackness. The halls were stripped of life. Balloons and streamers from the ceremony still clung to the walls, limp and deflated. A discarded program lay trampled on the floor. My sneakers squeaked faintly on the waxed linoleum as I drifted deeper, passing lockers that seemed to hum faintly, like something alive had been stuffed inside. I told myself I'd walk to the library, maybe the science lab, just one last circuit before leaving forever. But each turn pulled me further from the exit, down halls I didn't remember ever using. The school wasn't that big. I should have known every hallway, every door. Yet here I was, standing in front of a corridor I swear had never existed. It was narrower than the others, with no posters, no decorations, just bare cinder block walls and a floor stained with something dark that glistened in the beam of my phone. I should have turned back. Instead, I stepped forward. The air grew colder as I walked, my breath fogging faintly. My footsteps seemed louder here, too loud, like the floor amplified every sound. At the end of the hall stood a single door, unmarked, its paint peeling away in long strips. My pulse quickened. Some part of me knew what waited beyond wasn't meant to be seen, but my hand reached out anyway. The knob was icy against my skin as I turned it and pushed the door open. Inside was a classroom, but not like any I'd ever been in. The desks were arranged in a perfect circle, not rows, and in the center stood a tall wooden chair, like something from a courtroom. It was old, splintered, and bound with thick straps at the arms and legs. I froze, my phone light sweeping across the room. The chalkboard behind the circle was covered in frantic writing, layer upon layer of words, scrawled in white and gray until they overlapped into chaos. Stay until the lesson is learned. You cannot leave until you take your seat. I laughed nervously under my breath, but it came out shaky and hollow. A prank, I told myself. Some old ritual, maybe something kids did decades ago. But the moment I stepped inside, the door behind me slammed shut. My light flickered, plunging the room into half-darkness before steadying again. That was when I noticed I wasn't alone. The desks were occupied. Figures slumped in each seat, motionless, heads bowed. My throat tightened as I lifted my phone higher, shining it into their faces. They weren't students, not anymore. Their skin was shriveled and gray, stretched over bone, their eye sockets hollow. Some still had scraps of clothing clinging to them, old-fashioned uniforms yellowed with age. There were at least 20 of them, surrounding the chair in the center like a jury. My chest clenched as I stumbled back, my hand clawing at the doorknob, but it refused to turn. One of the figures stirred. A hand twitched, bony fingers curling against the desk. Then another raised its head, empty sockets glowing faintly with a sickly light. One by one they straightened, their skulls creaking, their jaws working like rusted hinges. A sound rose from them all at once, a chorus of dry, rattling whispers, like leaves dragged across pavement. "Sit down," they hissed. I shook my head violently, pressing against the locked door, my whole body trembling. "Sit down," they repeated, louder this time, their whispers layering into something almost deafening. Their heads all turned toward the chair in the center. My legs shook so badly I nearly collapsed, but somehow I staggered toward it. The air felt thicker the closer I got, heavy with the smell of rot and something acrid that burned my throat. The chair loomed before me, the straps hung open, waiting. I knew that if I sat, I might never stand again, but their hollow eyes pinned me, their whispers drilling into my skull until it felt like my brain would split apart. My knees buckled, and I fell into the chair. The wood groaned under my weight, the straps snapping shut around my wrists and ankles with a force that made me cry out. Immediately, the whispering stopped. The room was silent, except for the sound of my own panicked breathing. Then, slowly, one of the skeletal figures rose. It shuffled toward me, each step dragging, bones creaking with the effort. It carried something in its hand, a long, thin stick of chalk. Without a word, it reached the board and began to write. The scraping sound was unbearable in the silence. It wrote a single sentence, each letter deliberate and jagged. "Now teach us what you learned." My heart pounded. My mouth was dry. I shook my head, tears burning my eyes. I didn't understand. What lesson? What did they want? The figure turned toward me, empty sockets glaring, and raised the chalk like a knife. The others began to tap their bony fingers on the desks, a rhythm that grew louder, faster, echoing in my chest like a heartbeat. "Teach us," they hissed together. "Teach us." I screamed that I didn't know, that I had nothing to give. But the tapping only grew more frenzied until the room shook with the sound. The chalk figure stepped closer, its arm raising higher, and for one awful moment, I thought it would drive that stick straight into my throat. Then everything went black. When I woke, I was lying in the center of the gymnasium floor. The sun was rising through the high windows, casting pale light over the bleachers. My phone was dead in my pocket. My wrists and ankles ached, red welts forming where the straps had held me. Around me, scattered across the polished wood, were dozens of pieces of chalk, broken and worn to nubs. I stumbled out into the morning, dazed, my gown and cap still lying in the parking lot where I'd left them. My car was there, but the driver's seat was covered in chalk dust, thick and white, as if someone, or something, had been waiting. I never went back inside that school. Most of my classmates moved on, left town, forgot about the building that raised us. But sometimes, late at night, I dream I'm still strapped to that chair, the whispers in my ears demanding I teach them what I never learned. And I know someday when the lesson is overdue, they'll call me back to finish it. Do you believe in ghosts? Do you think that your house might be haunted? Well, this is a scary story about a girl who's trying to sell her family home only to find out that it might be haunted by a ghost with a really messed up backstory. My mother and I decided to put our family home up for sale. It was the best decision we ever made. We'd lived there for over 20 years. I'm now 38 years old, and I grew up in that house. So you can imagine how hard it was for me to accept the fact that I was no longer going to live there. I grew up in a small city in Arizona. This is the type of place where the sun shines almost every day. Every night we'd sit on the porch and watch the sunset. Those were some of my favorite memories with my family. And now that's going to be someone else's memories. And for the most part, the people who live in this area don't leave. They stay in their houses forever. I'm not sure if they do this because of the way the houses are built or because of how beautiful this city is. Either way, I understood why we needed to sell our house. Mom had gotten sick. She'd recently had cancer surgery, and I knew that she needed money for the hospital bills. It was either I sold the house or she would have to pay for it herself. So I agreed. I took the house off the market, I hired a realtor, and within 2 weeks we had a buyer. As you can probably tell, I am not good at dealing with these types of things. I started to go through the house to decide which of my things I would take with me and which ones I would leave behind. Our deal with the new owner was that he could come by and inspect the house at any time during the week before the transfer. And one Thursday, he wanted to come by and check out the attic. Now, my mother has always told me that the attic isn't safe and that I shouldn't go up there. For some reason, she also made me promise that I would never tell anyone that this attic exists. So I told the potential buyer that there was no attic. But he didn't believe me. He wanted to check it out, so I relented. I led him up the flight of stairs in the closet. And even though this thing is over, I still feel creeped out thinking about it. There were cobwebs everywhere, spiders, little bugs. It smelled like dust and mold. And the whole time I could hear scratching sounds like claws or fingernails. But I ignored it and just pretended to look around, hoping that he would get bored and come downstairs. But after a few minutes he left and I was finally able to explore. At the far corner of the room I found a wooden box tucked away in the shadows. It was big and heavy and I don't know why I did it. But I opened it. There were some old records in there, but they were covered in what looked like blood. There was something about the way it looked that made me shiver. So I shut the box, knowing that I didn't want to see whatever else was hiding inside. The house sold pretty quickly, and it was only a month later that we had officially moved out. I drove past the house one day, and I saw that the new owners were already making changes to it. It made me sad, but also a little angry that someone was going to live in my childhood home and destroy all my memories. It was only a few days later when I got a call from my new landlord. He asked me if I knew that there was an attic in the house. I responded, no, and he asked me if I could come over so he could show me something. I hadn't even unpacked yet, so I told him to come by in an hour. When I arrived, he took me upstairs to the closet, and we climbed up the stairs together. But this time, he continued to walk farther into the darkness. He turned the light on, revealing a stack of old boxes hidden in the corner. He said that they'd been here since the previous owner had lived here. I didn't say anything. I just nodded. And even though I didn't think it would bother me, the scratching sound from earlier was driving me crazy. I just wanted to get out of there. He insisted that I look through the boxes, seeing as I'd lived in the house for 20 years. And honestly, I just wanted to leave. But I opened one of the boxes. Inside was an old television set, an Atari console, a pair of rollerblades, a high school diploma. It was like looking through the life of someone else. These weren't my things. Then I found a diary. It was leather-bound and wrapped in string. There was something so eerie about the way it was packaged that I couldn't resist. I opened it and read, April 4th, 1965. Today I met James. I haven't been this happy in years. We spent the entire day talking and laughing. The diary belonged to my mother. I didn't know she had one. And the diary continued on for hundreds of pages. She wrote about boys and parties, vacations and fights with her sister. But one entry made me stop. It was dated May 12th, 1973. It read, James was up in the attic today. He said that he wants to build a secret room in the attic. He says that no one will ever find it. He says it will be our special place. He seems so excited about it, and I think that it will be fun to see how far he gets with it. As I read this, my blood ran cold. My mother hadn't mentioned that James was planning to build a secret room in the attic. And suddenly everything made sense. All the rumors about the house. The neighbors used to whisper about my mother having a boyfriend named James. And then she mysteriously disappeared one day. I showed the last entry in the diary to my landlord, and he confirmed that the house was built sometime in the 1940s. But it wasn't until after he left that I realized what that meant. James had been living in the attic all this time. But how? How could someone stay up there without eating? And why would my mom's diary abruptly stop? I climbed the stairs in the closet. The scratching sound was definitely coming from above. I shone the light into the attic, but it was too dark to see anything. So I flipped on the light switch. It was then that I noticed the trap door. I cautiously stepped closer and pushed it open. The smell immediately hit me. Mold, dust, and decay. I could also hear movement, footsteps pacing back and forth. I hesitated before descending. There was another light switch on the other side, and when I clicked it on, I saw the most terrifying thing I've ever seen in my life. The attic contained a whole apartment. There was a kitchen with a small refrigerator and stove, a bathroom with a shower, a living room with a couch and television. And in the bedroom, I found clothes, a record player, and an old mattress. I didn't know what to think. It was like someone had been living here secretly. And then I found his diary. It was leather-bound like my mom's, but this one had a key wrapped around it. The key fit perfectly in the lock, and the diary was filled with handwritten stories about living in the attic, about how he worked on it day and night, about how he would hide in the closet and wait for my mom to visit him. His diary also talked about how he would listen to her move around in the house, how he would hear her laugh and talk to her boyfriend James. It wasn't until a few months later that I learned the truth. One of the older neighbors told me that my mom and James had planned to run away together, but my dad found out and killed James. He buried him somewhere in the backyard, and then he made my mom believe that he had sent her to boarding school. I still don't know what to think. Did James make the apartment himself? Was he planning to kill my mom's boyfriend? Why did he kill him? Is he the reason why my mom's diary stopped? Whatever it was, I don't want to know. Thanks for listening. If this story freaked you out, please give it a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, and be sure to share your thoughts in the comments. I love reading them. Stay safe out there, and remember, you're awesome.